is all of our great honor and pleasure to welcome back to Los Alamos Father John Carney, who needs little introduction in this community, but there are new people moving here all the time. And a lot of your life story I didn't know myself. Father Carney was he was born in New York City to Irish parents, in case you couldn't tell. He graduated with a BA in political science from Providence College in Rhode Island, and then received he was then commissioned in the U.S. Army, where he ended up serving for 20 years, serving as an infantry officer in Vietnam, in Germany, and in Korea, where he picked up a lot of Korean in 1 year.
Some I can't use.
Not on camera, not on camera. He received a Master's of Military Arts and Science from the Command and General Staff College in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and then retired as a lieutenant colonel in 1987, was then accepted as a seminarian for the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, studied in Mount Angel Seminary in Oregon, where I grew up. Not at the seminary, but in Oregon. And he received his Master's of Divinity degree from Mount Angel in 1991. In 1991, he was ordained a priest for our Archdiocese. He served at St. Thomas Aquinas in Rio Rancho, Holy Child in Tierras, served as the vocation director for the Archdiocese, and then, of course, became pastor of Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish in 2002, where he served until 2013, at which point he was assigned as pastor of Church of the Incarnation in Rio Rancho until he retired in June 2016. I count myself very blessed that I arrived in Los Alamos in 2012, just in time to have Father Carney as my pastor for just over a year. His resume of military service is extensive. I won't read it all. Many of you know it well, but he is a recipient of the Bronze Star, amongst many other medals and honors as a military officer, and of course has dedicated his life to the service of us in the Church, and he's here to tell us about issues related to morality and nuclear weapons, and from perhaps a more pastoral perspective. And we recognize, being a Society of Catholic Scientists, we need not only to talk about science, but living our life as Catholics in the world requires pastoral guidance as well. So we're we welcome you heartily to speak to us today about this important topic. So the floor is yours, Father Carney, and I'm not going to time you.
Thank you, Chris. What year did you marry?
2016.
Yeah, because I remember in 2012 I was trying to get you to get into the seminary. But things worked out well. I met them a little while ago. Before I start, you're going to think that myself and Ray Jositis conspired on our talks. To some degree we did. We've been in email contact, crying on each other's shoulders since, these last several months. I have a great deal of admiration for Ray, and of course his wife Helen, who was our director of religious education for so many years. When Chris asked me if I would speak, I said, I'm not a scientist. And he said, well, give us your perspective on these things, and I'm honored and humbled to do so. But one quick story. I was, again, pastor of this typical American town for 11 years. And I have a lot of stories,
So do we.
Yeah. But one quick story. In 2012, there was the community was very excited with the discovery of the God particle. You remember that? The Higgs boson, huh? Everyone was all excited because I guess the question was, I don't understand it. I asked Alexa this morning to explain it to me, and she failed. Science didn't know where mass comes from, where matter comes from. And so this was the God particle, and Higgs boson is its name. And all of the town was at Twitter on this exciting news, So the following Sunday, at Mass, I began the 9 o'clock Mass, which was very well attended, and I said, you know, before Mass began this morning, the ushers wouldn't let this fellow in. They kicked him out. Of course, you know, it's probably indelicate because of terrorism, whatever, but I did get their attention. And he said, well, my name is Higgs Boson. If you don't let me in, there'll be no Mass. Well, so that's not the joke. The joke is, there was this laughter in the church. There were probably 600 people there. And I said, how many of you actually understood that joke? And about 25%. I said, put your hands down. I said, how many didn't understand? About 75. I said, you people are normal. Okay? So that was my Higgs boson. Never forget it. Let me see if I can read this without, no, there's no light. The question, is the possession of nuclear weapons immoral? That's the question that we've been confronted with, especially in the Catholic Church, especially in recent months. I addressed this question from my personal perspective of both a soldier and a priest. And as mentioned, I have a Master of Military Arts and Sciences, and I have an MDiv, a Master of Divinity. So I'm a theologian, a poor one, but nonetheless, I am considered a theologian. And my comments today represent only my views, right? I do not speak for the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, believe me. The Archbishop would not select me, you know, to give his presentation. But let me tell you about I had personal experience with nuclear weapons. And let me just tell you what that experience was. In the Infantry Officer Advanced course at Fort Benning, Georgia, as a captain, we took a course on the planning of tactical nuclear weapons. You know, what weapon to use under what situation concerning thermal blast, tree blowdown, area denial weapons, et cetera. It was very kind of practical stuff. But even as a young captain, I remember saying, wow, this is dangerous stuff. God forbid it should ever happen that we have to use it. Later, I had 2 tours in Germany. I was with the 8th Infantry Division and the 3rd Army Division near Mannheim and near Frankfurt. And I often had NRAS EMAS duty as a captain. NRAS is the Nuclear Release Authentication System, NRAS. EMAS is the Emergency Message Action System. In other words, that's the message that initiates the decision that the president makes for a nuclear attack of some sort. I'll explain that a little bit more. So that was at captain level, you know, low-ranking company grade officer, which I retired as a low-ranking company grade officer. But later I was assigned to the Pentagon. Somebody said earlier, I wish some priest went to the Pentagon. Well, hello. I was assigned to DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, okay? But because we have to have a dual track, and at least years ago, a dual track of specialty. So I was an airborne ranger grunt, you know, infantry guy, and I was an intel officer. I never received any sophisticated intel training in the intel field of the Army, but I was assigned to DIA because I can talk. And so I was the DIA rep to the NMCC, National Military Command Center. You've seen it in the movies as the War Room. It's a very interesting place. I had that job for 39 months. There were 5 teams. Just a quick look at a war room, and this is where the key is turned, okay? So it's a really important place. That's its primary function. After the National Command Authority, the president, makes a decision to use nuclear weapons, that is relayed to the DDO, the Deputy Director of Operations, a flag officer, a 1-star, and he then authenticates it is the president he's talking to and made the decision, breaks open his little cookie, authenticates the code, and then the key is turned there along with another key by the president within a specified period of time, and Katie barred the door. We're in big trouble. And so that was always in my mind. And the older I got, I said, my God, this is awful. We must not do this. The NMCC itself had a DDO and an ADDO, was in 06. And then there was a European desk. There was the PACOM desk, Pacific Command, and European, Africa, Middle East and Africa. And then I sat with the intel guys, so I was DIA, and it was NSA and CIA. And the NSA and CIA would get old duds about to retire to sit in those chairs. So I did most of the briefing. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs would come in, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Joint Chiefs would come in after golf on Saturday, for an update on the latest crisis du jour, like the Israeli incursion into Lebanon, or to shoot down a 007 by the Russians, the Korean airplane, you may remember, the Falklands-Malvinas War, the Contras and Sandinistas, whatever the problem, the Jaruzelski decline, where's Joseph? Martial law in Poland, you remember that well. But nonetheless, so it became a situational update room for 4 stars. And I often would brief Caspar Weinberger. That's a name you probably remember as SecDef, Secretary of Defense. But the major role of that NMCC was there because of the nuclear response. And that's where, after due consideration, the EMAS is sent out, the Emergency Message Access System, to the forces throughout the world. And so when we had night shift, we would often practice what we call a missile attack conference. Generally, always, the scenarios, and like I might place SecDef, I might place chairman of the Joint Chiefs, vice president, speaker of the House, whatever, the chain of command, if you will. And generally, it was about an attack, a missile attack perpetrated by the Soviet Union. This was in the 80s, so the Soviet Union was alive and well. It was alive. And so we would respond to it. So we'd go through a practice scenario, and the president's on the line, et cetera, to make sure that the DDO, we were really training the Deputy Director of Operations, the DDO, that 1 star, how this is actually going to work if it, God forbid, ever it would happen. And so we had access to the SIOP. It's called something else today, the SIOP, SIOP, Single Integrated Operation Plan. And what it is, it's a book of menus of nuclear responses, depending on what the threat, the incoming threat is, and what the intent of the National Command Authority is in terms of responding to that threat. And so to read the SIOP is shocking. By the way, each target in the SIOP was, and I believe still is, vetted by lawyers, which I kind of found interesting. Per some comments you made earlier about precision weapons and minimizing collateral damage and civilian casualties. So we actually have the law involved in it, which is a good thing, according to Geneva Convention and other laws and regulations. And so all of that gave me, I think, an appreciation of the danger we face as humanity, kind of in a close and personal way, if you will. I was going to, if God forbid it ever happened, I was going to be partly responsible for it. That's how I felt. That's how you feel. And therefore, it was not a burden, but it was like a responsibility that was quite heavy. Then I became a priest. So, I used to have a very sophisticated, why did you become a priest? I had this very romantic poet. I don't know. God put that in my heart, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. Believe me, there was nothing in my former conduct that would suggest that, And anyway, I became a priest. I retired in 1987, and I went to Mount Angel Seminary in Oregon, and I was ordained in 1991. And I've been with you for 31 years. And I retired 6 years ago, but it's always good to be here. I was here 11 years, again, as your pastor. Shortly after I got here, you remember the name John Deere, Reverend John Deere, Jesuit S.J. Well, he said, and I'll quote him, he said that Los Alamos is not just immoral. I think what they are doing there is demonic. You demonic people. So, and I'm the pastor, and this is a Catholic priest, right? And he's teaching this. As a matter of fact, on each August 6th, the anniversary of Hiroshima, he would come with the sackcloth and ashes, they probably still do, to go to Ashley Pond and walk around and get arrested at some point, Deere had been arrested 70 times for 70 felonies, throwing blood at the Pentagon. He was, who were the brothers, the 2 priest brothers? One of them was the Barragan brothers. So he was, matter of fact, he did their funerals, I believe. And so he was very much involved in it. So I called Archbishop Sheehan. I said, this guy, look, I'm the priest here, okay? So he's coming up and he's teaching his stuff. And Bishop Sheehan said, no, what can I do, John? I said, do something. So I said, if you don't, the next time he comes up, I'll leave and he can be the pastor. Oh, John, this is, Archbishop Sheehan would always say, John. He was a little afraid of me because I'm crazy, it helps. He told Deere, he said, don't you go to Los Alamos without getting Carney's permission. And so Deere wrote me a beautiful letter, and I wrote him back as, denied. You have 70 felony arrests, you're not a pacifist, really. You claim to be, but you're not, because of some things that he had done. And so he wrote me another letter. Oh, he wasn't a pacifist. And his response to my letter. And then I published, I think it was an op-ed piece, by 600 words, some of you may remember it, in the Albuquerque Journal, defending the people of this good place, and that they're not demonic. And you can still grab that online. It's John Carney versus John Deere. By the way, John Deere is no longer functioning as a priest. The Jesuits said, no, you're just beyond the pale. So he lost his faculties. And he hasn't been laicized, but in effect, he has been laicized. God bless him. I mean, I don't doubt his personal, but he did think he went up to Angel Fire. He told the people, don't vote, because the voting system's rigged, and this government is controlled by the corporations, and don't vote. That's not Catholic. We don't believe that. We vote, right? So he was making up all this nonsense. He was kind of, he was woke early, But the point in some of this, my military, who hasn't questioned the morality of their work? If you haven't, get out of this work. My goodness, this is serious business we're in. So who hasn't questioned it? And I think you all have. That's certainly my experience. Certainly Robert Oppenheimer, Oppie, did. You know the comment he made when he witnessed the first nuclear explosion in the desert of New Mexico. He said, he quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu scripture. He said, now I become death, the destroyer of worlds. Oh, how dramatic that comment was at that moment as he watched that first nuclear explosion. Now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds. So is this possession itself immoral? If it's immoral, then we got to get rid of all our nukes now. That's it. It's the end of deterrence. We just need to get rid of them. But what's moral mean? What is that? So according to Webster, morals are the principles we follow that help us know the difference between right and wrong. When someone is immoral, they make decisions that purposely violate a moral agreement. Now, the Catholic teaching, and again, we did not conspire, but much of this is redundant to you. The Catholic teaching, of course, began on nuclear weapons and the possession and use of, began in 1945, obviously on 6 and 9 August of that year. And so going back just kind of quickly, Pius XII in 1954, Pope Pius XII argued that, quote, every possible effort must be made to avert atomic warfare through international agreement. Roger that, and I think we've done some of that, I know. Later, St. John the 23rd, by the way, it was interesting, I love St. John the 23rd, he was the fat little pope, and matter of fact, Archbishop Sheehan had a picture of him smoking a cigarette. And he was really fat, having a good time. But he was a jolly fellow, and really, he opened the windows of Vatican II and let the Holy Spirit in. Of course, he didn't live long past the beginning of Vatican II, but nonetheless is a revered figure and a saint in our church. So he wrote this encyclical letter, which has power. There are levels of teaching we have. An encyclical letter has some juice, and it was called Passamentaris, Peace on Earth. And he said the stockpiles of armaments which have been built up in various countries must be reduced all around and simultaneously by the parties concerned. They must be reduced all around and simultaneously by the parties. Well, I think as your charts pointed out, we've made some progress. Today, less than 1/5 of what was in the arsenals of the nuclear powers at the height of the Cold War in the 80s, only about 1/5 of those weapons, in terms of numbers, still exist. I think you, the 80% use 90%. Interesting, between 1990, and this is State Department, between 1994 and 2020, relative to the last 24 years, 26 years, but in that period, the United States dismantled 11,683 nuclear warheads. Since September 2017, the United States has dismantled 711 nuclear warheads. Approximately 2,000 additional nuclear warheads are currently retired and awaiting dismantlement from the U.S. State Department. That's something, you know, so there has been, and I would appreciate if some of the information coming from both the Archdiocese and the Vatican would kind of mention that. It's not like we've been sitting there, let's make more nukes, you know? You know, it's like we've been doing something about it. We care about this. However, of course, in recent years, we have the issue, the problem of North Korea, that, I don't know, has 8, 10 nuclear weapons. I don't know if anyone knows. And they're developing delivery systems, as we know, these past couple of months. Kim Jong-un's not getting enough attention. I want attention, so he blows things up. You know, I spent a year on the DMZ in 1984, and Kim Il-sung was still alive then, and then Kim Jong-il followed him, now Kim Jong-un. And it's just terrible. There's 25 million North Koreans. God bless them, how they suffer. But nonetheless, he's a danger. He's a danger. You've seen some of the films where they have animated films of blowing up New York City? Have you seen some of those? You know, it's just so evil. And now we're worrying about Iran. You know, you've read the Ayatollah's comments about the state of Israel, what he plans to do. You know, I don't know if you ever read Hamas's comments on we will kill every Jew. You know, I think it's Article 7 of their platform. There's some really wicked people out there that have bad intentions. They're bad actors, and that's the reality, as you more thoroughly explained a while ago. Now, St. John Paul the Great, I love that man. I wouldn't be a priest without him. I love that man. Matter of fact, when he died, it was a Saturday. We had exposition of the Blessed Sacrament, and I had to come in at the end of exposition to repose the Eucharist, and I was crying. And I was surprised, because I only cry when my parents die or Notre Dame loses. So I was, you know, I loved him, and I didn't really know it until he died, you know. In 1982, we're getting current here, Pope John Paul II broke with over 3 decades of Vatican policy when he emphatically stated in front of the United Nations General Assembly that nuclear deterrence could be judged as morally acceptable step on the way towards a progressive disarmament. I think you had that very quote, right? 1983, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops said, in current conditions, deterrence based on balance, certainly not as an end in itself, but as a step on the way towards a progressive disarmament, may still be judged morally acceptable. 1983. Now, Pope Benedict, of course, the successor of John Paul, he addressed, and I didn't do a complete study, but he looked at the cost of nuclear weapons. And here's a quote: how expenditure on armaments generally, serve to perpetuate domestic and local inequalities. I think that's probably very, very true. And he emphasized the urgent need to both revitalize non-proliferation efforts and move to decommission existing nuclear weapons. Again, there's been some progress made in that regard. Now here's the big change in Pope Francis in 2015. He became Pope in 2013. He said, again in front of the United Nations General Assembly, quote, we must therefore commit ourselves to a world without nuclear weapons. Okay, got that, I agree. He condemned even the possession of nuclear weapons as immoral, with the statement that, quote, the threat of their use as well as their very possession is to be firmly condemned. We're talking sin here. Immoral, condemned sin. He broke, therefore, completely with JP2. With JP2's position that nuclear deterrence could be considered a moral intermediate step towards disarmament. He changed completely. He said also recently, I believe, I don't have a date on this, the use of atomic energy for purposes of war is immoral, just as the possessing of nuclear weapons is immoral. So he's thrown deterrence out. It's gone, from my reading. As a matter of fact, after he made that comment, he said, we must change the catechism. It was kind of interesting. The catechism JP2 gave us, because what do we believe? What do we believe? I don't know what we believe. So here, let's publish what we believe. And that catechism took years and years and years to write. And so Pope Francis said, we must change. And we kind of threw that off. He shot from the hip on that when he said it. But also, around the same time, I think this was in a press conference on one of his returning from wherever. You know, he has these little mini press conferences on airplanes. They're dangerous. I think Biden's advisors shake also, you know, at that time. But he said he also disapproves of the use of nuclear energy until it is proven fail-safe. We're talking nuclear reactors for power. Tell that to the French, who get 80% of their electricity from nuclear reactors. He made that comment at Fukushima. Well, there was a problem with Fukushima. But then he said, but this is just my personal opinion. So it's kind of, he separated his personal opinion from what I thought was his personal opinion earlier, but apparently he had more gravitas than that. Now, Archbishop Wester, my Archbishop, who I swore loyalty to, not loyalty, but obedience. And I'm obedient to the Archbishop. I have never disobeyed the Archbishop, never will. Archbishop Wester fully endorses the Pope's position. And he said this recently, after his January big paper. He said this recently concerning the war in Ukraine, where now we're worrying about the use of TAC nukes and whatever. He said, we still have not learned the essential lesson of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is that the only way to eliminate the nuclear danger is through careful, universal, verifiable steps to eliminate nuclear weapons. Well, that is a restatement of deterrence, in my view. He's not saying get rid of them. He's saying universal, verifiable steps, careful. And so I think Archbishop Wester actually has not as severe, if you will, a position on this as the Holy Father does. The Archbishop also said recently, our labs could help us toward that end by providing new verification technologies that could help underpin a future world free of nuclear weapons. Some of you are in that business, aren't you? Yeah, verification technologies that could help bring this about. You know, we have to verify. You know, Reagan say trust but verify. I say verify. As an Irishman, we lived 600 years with the British, so I'm very careful. You know? But I think we're doing just that. So there's a contradiction, I think, in the current, with the Archbishop saying that agreeing that possession itself is immoral, and at the same time suggesting that possession, that careful, universal, verifiable steps to eliminate nuclear weapons is something we should be doing. And I really think we've been doing it with the various START treaties and SALT treaties and intermediate weapon treaties, et cetera. So here's the deal. What are we to think? What's a faithful, Catholic, caring person to think? You know, are papal administrations just like political administrations? You got a new president, you got a whole new policy. You got a new pope, you got a new policy? That doesn't sound right to me. Are these thoughts from the Holy Father infallible? Clearly not. They're not ex cathedra, they're not from the chair, like the Immaculate Conception and Assumption. Actually, those are the only two infallible teachings of the Catholic Church. The Assumption of our Blessed Mother into heaven and the Immaculate Conception. Those are the only two infallible teachings. Are these teachings, another term we use, irreformable, like the Nicene Creed? I love the Nicene Creed because that's what we believe. Simple. It's pretty short. That's irreformable. And, you know, we argued for a better part of 4 centuries after Jesus, 3 centuries, after Jesus ascended into heaven. We argued, what do we believe? Was he really God? Or Superman, right? Arian and, Nestorianism. You may be familiar with some of these, what are now declared heresies, but they were spoken by well-meaning Christians early on. So finally, the Great Nicene Council, 323, what year was it? See, they always know stuff like that. They always know stuff. Anytime I made a factoid mistake in my homily of date or preaching, I'd get like 6 emails the next week. And they wouldn't say, "Hi, Father, that was really a good sermon, but you said it was 1492, not 13. No, they'd go, "You're wrong." I got used to it. So irreformable creeds, sacraments, teachings on sin and grace? No. So is this guidance from the Holy Father definitive? Like the communion of saints, our teaching on abortion and euthanasia are definitive teachings. You really can't be Catholic in good stead if you don't hold those beliefs, those important definitive teachings of our church. Well, the answer is none of the above. They are opinions, and opinions we should listen to. We as Catholics are obliged to listen attentively to our Pope and our Archbishop, and you have listened attentively. The word, you probably know this, the word obedience comes from the Latin obidare, ob meaning to or for, and audare means to hear. So obedience means to hear. And we often say to hear, to listen attentively. And that's the definition of obedience. Not necessarily to agree with. The Pope, Holy Father, and Archbishop give opinion on a lot of things. Sometimes the Holy Father shoots from the hip. I'll tell you a quick little story. Don't shoot from the hip. I was in Vietnam as a platoon leader at the 82nd Airborne Division, and every once in a while we'd have what we call a mad minute. We'd get permission from the next higher headquarters, and we'd all line up and shoot. We knew that the downrange area was safe, so we'd shoot the M60 machine gun, the M16, the M79 grenade launcher. So I was fooling around. I'm a dumb 22-year-old lieutenant, and I grab a M79 grenade launcher. It's 40 millimeter spin-armed, high explosive round. And they're spin-armed. They have to go out X meters before they can explode. So I'm John Wayne. "Oh, watch this one." Boom! And the kid next to me goes, "Oh!" And it detonated early or something, and I was fooling around. So don't shoot from the hip. And I should send that to some people who outrank me in the church. Where am I? So he says, early on in the, 24 February this year, the invasion of Ukraine, he said that, well, what do you get for NATO barking at Russia's door? Did you hear that comment? Holy Father, please. He as the war went on, he didn't clarify that. Matter of fact, he called the head of the Russian Orthodox Church Putin's lapdog. I like that. But NATO, in other words, because NATO was barking at Russia's door, Russia had the right to stop. It's just crazy stuff altogether. He's known to actually use some intentional ambiguity. Intentional ambiguity. He's an Argentinian, and Perón used intentional ambiguity. Now, he wasn't a Peronist. He opposed Perón, and then later the Kirchners, who are the kind of the Peronist inheritors. He also imposed the junta there, the Galtieri, Amadazzo, Lamidazzo, whatever names were. So he was always for the little guy in Argentina, and he was, he took the subway to work, and we love him for his love of the poor and for his gentleness with those who are hurting. But intentional ambiguity, but that's not a criticism. I think Jesus did that too a little bit. There were sometimes he answered a question like, I don't know what he meant. And someone once asked the Irish, they said, "Do you Irish always answer a question with another question?" And the Irishman said, "Do we now?" Also, the Holy Father's policy towards the PRC and the CCP, the communists, I have problems with. It's kind of a revision of Ostpolitik. John the 23rd was into Ostpolitik. Look, the Soviet Union's going to exist forever, so let's play nice with them. It doesn't work. JP2 knew that from the Nazi era to the communist era. So here's our boy JP2 and the people going, "We want God. We want God." He really upset the cart. when he visited Jaruzelski, Poland. Of course, Solidarity had started this great, beautiful movement. I'm telling you, I love Polish because Joe is there. But yeah, he said nothing about the Uyghurs. He said nothing about Hong Kong since 1997. Remember, it's 50-year guarantee of existing liberties and business models in Hong Kong. 50 years. 1997 is less than 50 years ago. And look what's happening to the good, formerly free people of Hong Kong. And Cardinal Zen. Do you all know Cardinal Zen? He's a great man. And Zen was opposed to the Holy Father's position on the secret deal that's made with the CCP to give China a chop on who we name bishops. Wars have been fought on that issue historically. There have been some concordats. Napoleon was interested in it, right? So it's a very touchy subject to give a foreign government, especially a communist government, an atheist government, a chop, a say on who you make bishop. And Cardinal Zen objected to it. Cardinal Zen's now in prison awaiting trial in Hong Kong. When asked about this recently, the Holy Father said, well, he has his opinion and I have mine. His brother Cardinal. Opinion. Am I disobedient to the Holy Father by questioning his policy towards the CCP and the PRC? I don't think so. Not at all. And I hope not to sound, I love Francis. He's the legitimate Pope of the Holy Catholic Church. I've never doubted that and I never will. But it doesn't mean I'm in total lockstep with him. It doesn't mean that he invented morality in March of 2013 when he became the Holy Father. The Archbishop also issues opinions on things. He puts out, for immediate release, these are press releases. So he had a very strong position on a soda tax. 2 cents an ounce soda tax. Because our people in Mexico have a lot of diabetes and they're fat. That was his rationale, so we're going to have a soda tax. Don't drink so much soda. What? I understand maybe Dr. Hansinger should have a vote on the soda tax. But not the head theologian, I don't know why you get concerned. Another thing, he's very insistent on increasing the disbursement of the land grant fund from 5 to 6.5%. You follow that one? First of all, we're swimming in money at the moment. We have to get rid of gazillions of dollars in New Mexico. Not only oil revenues, but a lot of the free money that came from the multi-trillion-dollar, relief acts. But I don't think so. I don't think we should increase that disbursement. But that's my opinion. That's the bishop's opinion. Good for him, good for me. I'm not held to that. And it's important that we Catholics know that. There are some people, though, if the Pope said it, that's it. If the Archbishop said, that's it. There's something called papal positivism. Have you ever heard that? It's relatively recent to me. A priest that I know introduced that to me. Papal positivism means whatever the Holy Father says is infallible. Well, that makes us look awful stupid, doesn't it? It does something to our free will. We can think. That's what we're doing here today. We're thinking about big issues and issues we care deeply about. The safety of humanity, the history of humanity. So, consider if we did dispossess all nuclear weapons immediately. Vladimir Putin, very happy. It's a tough world out there, man. It's a tough world. And some say, are you optimistic? I'm not. We have 5,000 years of recorded history or something, right? I'm really not. These issues won't be ultimately solved, in my opinion, until we've replaced the notion of peace with the shalom of God. And we got a ways to go. Let me read something as kind of a final meditation, if you will. The ancient Hebrew concept of peace. Now, Jesus said, as he left, peace is my gift to you. Peace is my farewell gift to you. But I give peace, not as the world gives peace, but I give you my peace. he's talking about shalom. The ancient Hebrew concept of peace, rooted in the word shalom, meant wholeness, completeness, soundness, health, safety, and prosperity, carrying with it the implication of permanence. Rabbi Robert I. Kahn of Houston, Texas, capsulizes the distinctives of Roman peace, what we consider peace, and Hebrew shalom. One can dictate a peace. Shalom is a mutual agreement. Peace is a temporary pact. Roman peace, our peace. Shalom is a permanent agreement. One can make a peace treaty. Shalom is the condition of peace. Peace can be negative, the absence of commotion. Shalom is positive, the presence of serenity. Peace can be partial. Shalom is whole. Peace can be piecemeal. Shalom is complete. So I'm not optimistic. I'm 76, and I'm not depressed. Hope you realize that. And I'm looking forward to the next life. You know, so many problems, self-inflicted wounds by humanity, the result of original sin, I guess. I'll accept that. But in the meantime, until that shalom of God comes, we have work to do. And I think we have made progress, and we must continue to make progress. Whether it's former Soviet Union, now Russia, Putin's on the way out. We all know that. But what follows is interesting, and I hope maybe it could be better. I hope so. 140 million Russians. They're not living a comfortable life right now. As far as China goes, that's the big enchilada. But we'll see what happens. So thank you for your attention. I hope I haven't offended anyone. If I have, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I mean, these are my thoughts, and I'm a free man in a free country. And being a priest doesn't pin me down to a strict structure of obedience to agree with whatever my boss says. And as I think as the boss would like.
Your earthly boss.
My earthly boss. I don't mess with him. Thank you. God bless you.
Right off the hook. Have any questions for Father Carney?
I think you hit on the infallibilities. I think part of the problem is, well, you mentioned it specifically as Catholics, but non-Catholics really have no concept of what infallibility means. I mean, they do think that anything the Pope says is infallible. How do we get...
Well, it's just misunderstood.
Really, how do we get that out there to everybody?
Go tell your people. The idea that a lot of non-Catholics think that we think everything the Pope, priest, whatever says is infallible. Of course not. 2 doctrines have been declared infallible, right? Right? The Immaculate Conception of Jesus in the womb of Mary, the Immaculate Conception of Mary in the womb of her mother, Anne, and the Assumption of Mary into heaven. You could probably argue that the third one might be the doctrine of infallibility itself, but that's considered more of a definitive teaching. So I don't know. That's listen. We Catholics are really misunderstood, and after Christmas years ago in Tijeras, a young woman came in to see me. She said, "Father, I was at Christmas Mass, and I was there because my kid said," she was a single mom. She said, "My kid said, how come we're not going to church, Mommy?" I said, "Okay, we're going to church." She said, "But something happened during Christmas Mass, and that's why I have an appointment with you today, Father. And there's so many questions I have about the church. I'm born and raised Catholic. I had First Communion, and that's it. And so I addressed some of the questions, like married and divorced and stuff. And she said, "Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I thought you were excommunicated." "No." And after her 10th, "I don't know that," she said, "How come no one told me this?" And I said, "Well, you look like an intelligent woman." True story. She worked for Sandia. She was one of you. And I said, "Well, how many books do you have in your house?" "A gazillion." "How many books on the faith do you have?" "None." Right? How many books of the faith do you all have? So that's the problem. We're very bad evangelizers, we Catholics. Right, we don't talk about religion or politics or some nonsense. That's why we fight at Thanksgiving, right? But, any other questions? Yes, John?
Father, I thought Ray said something good, and you didn't explicitly say it, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Ray talked about the church's teaching on self-defense. And I think a lot of us may never have read that. I mean, it's in the catechism.
Yeah.
But we probably haven't read that. And frankly, I've never, ever heard a priest preach on it.
On self-defense, yeah,
On
we have.
self-defense. And
That's
how
right,
that-
yeah.
I mean, I think preaching on that and talking about that in this context
That'd be
would
a
be
good,
very useful.
would be a good, you heard
I
Father
don't
John
know.
Daniel, you take it. You left. I'll tell him.
Why don't we start?
Yeah, we have a right to self-defense, and Ray pointed out, more importantly, we have a duty of self-defense.
Exactly.
Years ago, I met with a fellow who was a pacifist. And I said, "Are you really a pacifist?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Let me ask you a question. You got a 12-year-old daughter whose life was in danger. And the only way you could save her life would be to shoot the assailant. Would you do it?" And I said, "If you would, you're not a pacifist. And if you wouldn't, you're not much of a father." And so there are people, and can you be a pacifist and a Catholic? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, without question. If that's what you believe, yes. But we are not pacifists, and Jesus said, "Wars will always be among you," and it's just, come on, look at history, it's brutal. Well, I told you more than I know.
Father, when the Cold War ended in 1989, 91, to me as a teenager, it's very miraculous. It wasn't just one specific thing. 10 years earlier, we thought it would go on forever. Can you speak to the power of prayer, the power of intercession?
Yeah, well, one of those from Fatima, there was a great pray for the conversion of Russia, and really the Soviet Union and communism. How many Hail Marys were offered? How many Fatima devotions were offered over the decades and decades for that intention? And then again, the Reagan JP2 conspiracy was dynamite, and also the Reagan introduction of the SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, I think scared Gorbachev. I mean, I think he said, "We can't compete with these guys. It's not going to work." So he introduced perestroika and glasnost, and the rest. It looked great for a while, And I still think I don't know. This Putin character is just unbelievable. He's a thug from the streets of St. Petersburg, of the First Order. And he has no backup. There's nobody behind him, And so, my prayer, so we continue to pray for that intention, is that when Putin goes, he's 70 now, which is, but it's not, I don't think he'll die of old age. I don't know. But when he goes, maybe there could be something to replace him from the oligarchs or wherever that would just open. It's only 144,000 Russians, right? And about 30,000 of them are not Russians. There are something like 22 different ethnicities in the Russian Federation. And some of them are like in Tuva. They're really Mongolian in terms of appearance and culture and religion. And so right now, Putin is in Russia, the Federation is facing the dissolution of the Russian Federation, whereas Putin is trying to follow Catherine the Great and reestablish the Russian Empire. It ain't working. And the world's second greatest army is totally inept, and that's been proven. They can't find their rear end with both hands. So
Yeah, I guess maybe follow up to that is, it's one thing to win the Cold War or whatever. It's another thing to win the peace. And people looking back in the last 20 years saying, were there lost opportunities? Or...
I personally, that's good. But I think there were lost opportunities. I think the Russians demand respect. We all do. And I think maybe we didn't sufficiently, I don't know. We just, NATO is strong. NATO's got 30 nations in it, or 27? 29 with Finland and Sweden, 29 nations. And Russia's also always been paranoid as well. So, but God bless the Russian people. They've given us so much poetry and literature, great science, right? I mean, Joe has made over, Joe Kaminsky has made over 50 visits to Russia. Not all that friendly, being a Pole, but I don't know, maybe we could just focus on that other threat instead of that tri or double threat, which is crazy. I follow this stuff, but I'm addicted to this stuff from my DIA days in the Pentagon. I read everything about it, so I have opinions. That's all they are, you know. So.
Final question? No? Thank you, Father Carney. I want to thank our three speakers for extremely thoughtful discussions, which I think, again, are great examples of what we're called to do in the Society of Catholic Scientists and as Catholics in general. I hope no one goes away with the impression that we're just here to disagree with or badmouth what some of our shepherds may have said. But I want to highlight, while we don't speak, we never claim to speak officially for the Church or for all Catholic scientists in the SCS, and we say we operate with due regard to her magisterium, which is a serious thing. We're serious about that, but maybe sometimes due regard. I believe what we've done is precisely that. I think we have taken seriously. I think Father Carney reminded us when your Archbishop or your Pope says something, we take it seriously. But I think I hope we have taken seriously the invitation of our Archbishop, in fact, to realize this is a time to engage in thinking and dialogue about very serious issues of nuclear weapons, defense, the safety of the world. I think Father Carney just told us that if you haven't questioned the morality of what you're doing, and this applies not just to the nuclear complex, but whatever it is your vocation in life is, if you haven't reflected on the ethicality, morality of important parts of your life, I don't think you may not be living up to your duty as a Catholic, and if we don't do that as a community, we're not living up to our duty as a church and within the society. So, I hope you go away from today taking this as an example of the kind of the thoughtfulness and thinking and taking seriously of what our church says, either infallibly or what our shepherds prudentially decide it is time to tell us. I also hope, and there are a couple of questions wherein you ask, what do we do to let people know what the church we actually believe as Catholics? Chip, he's not here, he asked earlier, are we doing enough to teach the scientific knowledge that is relevant for understanding our faith within the church? I hope these questions, I think that's part of what our society would like to try to help to do better. First of all, I think if we ourselves need to know our faith and be good practitioners of our professions, and to be respected, and witness, in your own professions, how your Catholic faith guides your life, your thinking, and I think we don't, as Catholics, we're not called to just rely on the voice of a few shepherds. It's the duty of every single one of us to witness to the Catholic faith, and especially in the world where we as laity carry out our vocations. So I invite all of you to participate in this mission of the Society of Catholic Scientists in the capacity that you are able. In practical terms, I want to remind you that we invite those of you who feel moved to do so to please help in guiding and leading this chapter, this organization. We'll be calling for volunteers to serve on our board in the next couple months. We have many events coming up in 2023 that we could dearly use your help with. and your ideas and inspirations for other activities that we can carry out in our community to carry out our mission effectively. But coming up again at the end of January will be talks by Dr. Maureen Kondik on how scientific research reflects on our understanding of the dignity of human life. So watch out for announcements about that. And one of those events will be right here in Los Alamos. I think Dr. Hansinger previewed almost the entire agenda of our conference in April, where there will be, we have some eminent external speakers being lined up to come speak to us in April about issues of science and ethics in genetics, vaccines, gender, human life, and we will also revisit the topic of just war and nuclear weapons as part of that conference. Sign up for the so the NM that conference will be open to anyone interested on our mailing list. Actually, the SCS annual conference, it is open to members of the SCS. So if you'd like to go to that, I encourage you to seek explore membership in the Society of Catholic Scientists. Next year's conference, I'm told that there's no specific theme. It will be on general topics of science and the faith. So it promises to be very interesting and of broad interest. So I invite you to think about that on your calendars. And again, just a reminder, this is where you can go, catholicscientist.org, to look for more information about the SCS as a whole. Our website for our chapter here in Mexico, and email this address if you'd like to. I'm going to assume if you gave me your email address for this meeting, you want to be on our mailing list. So you guys are all covered. If you didn't provide your email address and you'd like us to have it, please do so before you leave, or email this email address. And like I said, while we benefit from generous support from the larger SCS, we are also grateful for any donations that you feel moved to provide, and you can do so through these means here at the bottom of the slide. So, well, thank you all for coming. And since our current pastor went off to his pastoral duties on this busy Saturday afternoon, Father Carney already can tell, I'm going to ask him to give us, his former flock, most of us, a final blessing.
Just one little commercial. I'm participating in a journey down the Rhine from Switzerland to Amsterdam next May. It's a pilgrimage. It's not a tour or vacation. But there'll be about 150 people going. I'm not running it. Dr. Italy, Dr. Marcellino D'Ambrosio is actually running it. I'm one of the priests that will be on board. And if you come with me, I don't know if you'll come back any holier, but you'll have a good time. And let us pray. Lord Jesus, you came that the world might know the peace that you have with the Father eternally. Yet you taught us that in this life there will be wars and rumors of wars. Nations will rise against nations. However, through you, the world may be saved. O Lord, send your Spirit into the hearts of all men and women, that the world might know true peace and shalom through your abundant mercy. Amen. Amen. May God bless you all, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go in peace. Go in shalom.
Everybody.